Is AI partly to blame for current inflation and will it become deflationary? Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard as the Ainslie Group celebrates 50 years. Today, we welcome back Alex, who's been looking into the role of AI and what it's doing potentially in terms of inflation, but also ultimately deflationary trends. I really love this topic. How are you going today, Alex?
Going very well. How are you?
I'm good. I say I love this topic. I talk about it all the time. It's just, I said to you just before, it's sort of in equal measure, exciting and terrifying how fast this stuff is moving. But you really had quite an interesting take on it today from that angle that I don't think many are looking at it from, about it being inflationary first before ultimately becoming deflationary. Can you talk us through what you were talking about in the article today and what you mean by that?
So I guess the technology is not developed. So if you go back to when manufacturing adopted robotics, 1962 General Motors, but really it probably wasn't around to the 1990s that it really became mainstream because the technology becomes cheaper and cheaper. So it took manufacturing probably 1962 to 1982 till it became a bit more normalized. So about 20 years for the technology to start to cheapen. And I mean, it still cheapens now, I guess, but that dramatic $1 million for a big tech robot to $20,000 off the shelf can do exactly the same thing 20, 30 years later. AI is the same, but who's been investing in it? The Magnificent Seven. Their share prices have been going up. And what's been interesting is these companies that used to hang on to their cash files to invest in companies have actually been investing around 40% of their earnings on AI. So that money has been coming back into the economy where previously it was probably held off and taken out of the money supply because it's just parked in a bank account. So they've been spending probably more aggressively on this since about 2021. So this is my point. We're starting to hit that point where things start to become dramatically cheaper, faster. Now, these companies that have been investing in it, so if you look at their quarterly earnings between 23 and 24, Meta, for example, went up from 25 to 38%. One that I think is really interesting is Amazon, because they definitely use robotics as well as AI. So they're a very good combination one. Now, their gross margin's gone from 4 to 11%, which isn't amazing, but it is when you are one of the biggest, revenue companies in the world. They've more than doubled, nearly tripled their margin with the implementation of more and more robotics and more AI. Now, they're obviously investing aggressively. This technology is going to start coming off pretty rapidly now, which will allow other companies to invest and other companies to start adopting the technology. So what you've seen in the Magnificent Seven and a really big run-up in profitability, as technology becomes more and more available, the margins drop for everyone. So the first adopters always have the bigger margin gains, but eventually the productivity gets pushed down the line to everyone. Everyone can use the same technology, and all of a sudden the margins start decreasing again. Now, I think that's probably what's going to start happening, and that will mean that goods become cheaper again, or goods delivery becomes cheaper again. So I think what's happened in the last 4 to 5 years has caused an inflationary spend to really get the technology up. Now that's going to keep going, but we're going to start seeing the productivity gains rapidly passing through the rest of the economy.
That makes a lot of sense to me, that we will ultimately see that deflation. And that's the part people probably have talked about, that you do see it flow through eventually when all of that expenditure has served its purpose and we get these productivity gains. What industries do you think will benefit the most from that? Is it across the board, or is it a little bit more narrow and niche? And how quickly do you think those gains sort of filter through to those markets or the broader markets?
Well, initially we had manufacturing, so that was easy. So now a lot of robotics, a lot less humans, that became cheaper. What you're seeing now is probably more the service industry. So probably, a bit of restaurants, cars, that sort of delivery. Where we're not up to yet is human touch. So that's what you and I were talking about offline. People at this point in time are not going to let a robot look after an aged care person. So how quickly that starts coming through from here, healthcare, police, aged care, education, the one where you've always had a teacher, you've always had a doctor, you've always had someone, looking after the elderly. Will that be adopted as quickly as what we're seeing the adoption right now of services? Because that's been fairly rapid. And when the adoption falls over into the touch part, that's when we're going to see people not needed in a lot of these industries, which are the big inflationary industries right now. So looking at the CPI numbers out of the US, shock horror, they're 0.1% higher, which they're still on a very good trajectory down. So they still look deflationary. Oil, provided we don't end up in all-out war in the Middle East, is going to keep going down. So that's going to keep going on for the moment. So the question is, if you look at the inflation figures in the US, it's still healthcare, it's financial services, which we know why, but then it's also healthcare, human touch products, I guess, that are still inflationary. And so when that comes over, that's when we're going to see a very rapid deflation.
And with that is the unemployment. I mean, I suppose that's the elephant in the room here, is what happens when we experience that large amount of unemployment due to the AI advancements. My argument on this has always been that ultimately people weren't going to get fired because of AI replacing their jobs. For the vast majority, it was more going to be that when there was a redundancy or an opportunity for staff to be let go or just finishing up because of retirement or whatever, that they just didn't get replaced because AI ultimately replaced them. But from what you're saying there, I mean, we could experience a really rapid increase that is more people actually losing their jobs to these AI advancements. So, how do you view, what's the solution there? Like, how do you view how policymakers are going to tackle that? Or will they be backed into a corner that they have to go to a universal basic income? How do you sort of think about it?
I think jobs will be created. So it's not that I don't think that'll happen. I just think it'll be so rapid this time. The industrial one with manufacturing was 20 years. If you look at the housing bubble and what's happened in that around 2000, that was 10 years. This one could be 5 years, could be 10 years. It's going to be rapid, and it'll be the gap in the middle that causes the problem, not the outcome. Eventually, people will find jobs and there'll be new industries created, but I don't think there's been much thought behind what they will be. And I think the government has just been band-aiding everything by just creating more government jobs. And we've obviously spoken about what an inflationary disaster that's been. So, they're basically fighting the deflation with a crazy inflationary, let's just create more jobs for more people. And eventually that is just not going to work. And the risk that it blows up and we end up with huge deficits worldwide is what they're playing with. So that'll have to switch. But what the industries will be, I don't know. I mean, there've got to be a lot of people to program the robots. There's got to be a lot of people to problem solve and fix robots. But eventually the robots will do that too. So who knows? Creative, be an artist.
Well, that's what's always fascinated me with this discussion is a lot of the jobs that when you were back in school, you'd go, well, that's a career for someone who's very passionate about it, but it's not really a viable job if you want to climb the corporate ladder type of thinking. Those jobs may end up being the positions.
Passion jobs.
The passion jobs may end up being the vast majority of jobs going forward, and all these things that we thought were really high value that people really valued from the education system at least could be the ones that all get replaced. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens, but I can tell you the one solution that is not the solution is more government jobs.
Yeah, well, and we know why. It's just that massive inefficiency just does not end well, whichever way you look at it. But fascinating discussion. I love this topic, as I said, because it is scary, but it's also exciting when you think about what possibilities could be there. We just need to manage it well, which is going to be the challenge. I'm sure you agree with that.
I would think that governments managing anything well is always a challenge.
So you'll temper my enthusiasm with a little bit of reality there,
There we
as per
go.
usual. Thank you so much for your work on that today, Alex. Really enjoyed that topic.
No problem. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.